Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras, here with ILTV's Morning Briefing.
Tragic news over the weekend. I.D.F. Staff Sergeant Aviv Levi, an infantry soldier in the U.A.E. brigade, was killed when Palestinian snipers opened fire on Israeli troops along the Gaza border. This marks the first time that an Israeli soldier has been killed on the Gaza front since the 2014 war, Operation Protective Edge. Israel has launched a devastating retaliation on Hamas targets in retaliation to this tragic incident. For now, there's an uneasy calm, but make no mistake, this is by far the closest to war that we've been in the last 4 years. Prime Minister Netanyahu has offered his condolences to the family of fallen soldier Aviv Levi. Levi was 21 years old at the time of his death, and he was wearing bulletproof armor when he was struck by a bullet from a Palestinian sniper, and initially only considered seriously wounded, but unfortunately his condition quickly worsened and his health decayed too rapidly to undo the damage. As you can imagine, this death opened a chilling new reality to the quickly escalating crisis brewing on the Gaza front. I.D.F. forces struck some 60 Hamas targets in the Strip in retaliation to the news of Staff Sergeant Levi's death. 4 Palestinians, including 3 confirmed Hamas members, were killed in those attacks. Egypt reportedly pressured Hamas not to retaliate any further, warning the terror leaders that Israel would launch an all-out war in 2 hours if Hamas proceeded with escalation. This allegedly included the halting of incendiary kite and balloon attacks. Israel has not publicly confirmed nor denied any such ceasefire deal, but regardless, it's been more than 24 hours since that deal apparently emerged, and things have been relatively calm. But with blood spilt on both sides now, the region may stand on the precipice of war like never before. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has demanded Hamas step back from violence to avoid such a fate. For now, time will tell if the war is indeed on the horizon. The International Judo Federation has just made a very telling example out of 2 nations that have consistently discriminated against Israeli athletes. The United Arab Emirates and Tunisia have officially been stripped of their hosting duties for 2 international tournaments, a move that Israeli ministers hope will set a clear precedent for any countries that exclude Israelis from future sporting events. Both the U.A.E. and Tunisia have a long history of either banning Israeli athletes from competitions or else refusing to allow Israeli symbols at their events. This has played out many times, especially in the world of judo, where Israeli athletes are among the best in the world. Officials from the International Judo Federation have often scolded organizers for such behavior, but this is the first time that a significant punishment has been leveraged to actually deter it. Tunisia, however, has actually just refused to allow an Israeli athlete to compete in another sporting field, the World Chess Championship. Unfortunately, the victim here is a 7-year-old girl, Liel Levitan. Little Liel took home the gold at the European Chess Championships earlier this month, scoring her a top spot in the World Championship. But now, tragically, she won't even get a chance to compete at all. Tunisia has refused to allow Liel to compete simply because she's Israeli. Liel has been invited to compete at an alternative championship instead, which will take place in Israel. But obviously, this isn't exactly the same thing. We can only imagine how disappointed this little girl must be, and we can only hope that the situation can be fixed and that sports will build future bridges rather than tear them down. Jews of the diaspora have expressed outrage following the recent detention and investigation into conservative Rabbi Dov Chayun for marrying a couple outside the rabbinate. At 5:30 on Thursday morning, the Haifa police were knocking on Chayun's door, taking him in for questioning and releasing him only on condition that he return for more on Monday. The arrest came after the Haifa Rabbinical Court complained about a wedding that Chayun performed, which they noted included a mamzel, or someone born out of an extramarital affair. But aside from the fact that the Haifa Rabbinical Court retroactively concurred that the spouse in question was not a mamzer, this is also a precedent-setting use of the rabbinate's law. An amendment set in 2015 says that an officiant of a wedding who doesn't register the marriage with the rabbinate is liable to prosecution and up to 2 years in prison. But this is the first time that the law has actually been enforced. The president of Israel's Conservative Rabbinical Assembly called the actions unthinkable, and the U.A.E. Federation in New York said it was, quote, dramatically inconsistent with Israel's promise as the home of the entire Jewish people and its commitment to equality and respect for all its citizens, end quote. In protest, conservative and reform movement officiants gave themselves up to police in Jerusalem for also performing thousands of weddings. In a somewhat refreshing change, the Israeli Justice Ministry has just overwhelmingly endorsed the Public Defender's Office annual report. Released this morning, the report weighs heavily on police violence, destruction of evidence, and poor prisoner rehabilitation, among other things. Justice Minister Shaked has formed a committee with plenty of funding that focuses on fixing these issues. As a positive, the report notes that there's been an increased openness to alternatives to detention and that prison cells were mandated to offer 3 square meters per inmate. But the hard truths require a deep overhaul. The Defender's Office argues that false convictions are running amok, largely due to high volumes of defendants without representation, feeling pressures to admit to crimes just to get out of detention, an over-reliance on forensic evidence without taking into account human collection methods and errors, and more. Further, the report says that police are too quick to arrest in the first place, especially in cases when an arrest is not only unnecessary, but harmful to the defendant. Israel has been providing direct humanitarian aid to Syrians impacted by the civil war for years now, but nothing like this. The army has just launched an unprecedented covert operation and evacuated hundreds of Syrians from the war zone. This includes some 800 members of the White Helmets, a volunteer group of search and rescue workers who have operated in the most horrific regions of Syria for the last 4 years. The I.D.F. has confirmed the evacuation, which took place under the cover of night over the weekend. Army officials have even admitted that this is something of an out-of-the-ordinary operation by Israeli standards. But with President Assad's forces pummeling southern Syria like never before, these hundreds of civil defense workers were in immediate danger. The United States and Europe collaborated together to help Israel conduct the rescue operation. Jordan has agreed to accept all 800 members of the White Helmets and their families, who will be safely relocated to the UK, Canada, and Germany in the coming months. Israel's Operation Good Neighbor has seen literally tons of aid taken behind enemy lines into Syria to help families devastated by the war. Israel has even treated thousands of Syrians within Israeli territory with medical aid. But this overnight rescue is a truly unique and compelling example of Israeli humanitarian relief. The White Helmets have conducted hundreds of rescue operations in some of the deadliest Syrian war zones since 2014. The group says they've saved more than 114,000 lives and lost more than 200 of their own members.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.